Thy. None of the other dozens of man-made genders entered the ark, despite the minds of socialists who are devoted followers of an atheist and who insist on propagating such fairy tales. So, to claim protection for certain classes of mentally confused people in a twist of words rooted in Title VII is a miscalculation the courts have mistakenly allowed, just as they erred in many cases throughout the existence of the court. The practitioners of same-sex relationships have become the darlings of Hollywood, and public schools in California have included in their curricula presentations on the contributions of homosexuals to society instead of using valuable instructional time to teach students more math, science, and information technology. How is that helping America stay ahead of China? In point of fact, that wouldn't help America stay ahead of Botswana. The prophet Isaiah warned about calling good evil and evil good. But God's plan for human sexuality has been thwarted despite making his opinion on the subject very clear in Leviticus 20:13, Romans 1, and 1 Corinthians 6, 9-11. Ironically, gays didn't really care all that much about legalizing same-sex marriage. According to Masha Gessen, a lesbian activist, the stated goal of LGBT activism on gay marriage was not to legitimize it, but to destroy marriage and the traditional family, which was designed by God. As we said above, destroying the family was among the goals of Karl Marx, the Prussian godfather of socialism, and it can also be found mentioned in The Naked Communist as follows: discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity, and easy divorce. Remember Karl Marx and his penchant for abolishing the family. Remember, as goes the government, so could go our freedoms, including if not especially our religious freedom. And the Democrats recently sought to codify in law means to permanently obliterate religious freedom, a traditional element of our Constitution which tends to rub the leftist political base the wrong way. But think who their base is. Communists who oppose religion. Leftist financiers such as atheist George Soros also oppose religion. Marxist activists oppose religion, along with its traditional moral ethics. Gay activists oppose religion. The Democrat Party decries morality by championing gay marriage, and church membership is declining. As mentioned above, the Apostle Paul wrote that in the end times there would be a great falling away from religion, and Jesus won't come back until it happens. Interpret that as a cautionary tale while we watch Bible prophecy possibly being fulfilled in our own time. Speaking of opposition to religion, there is another George we need to introduce in connection thereto. George Brockchism, whose words may be a window into what's happening today. He once said, "To achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family tradition, national patriotism, and religious dogmas." Since Chisholm passed away in 1972, it's clear that the left's desire for a one-world government has been around for more than 50 years. It is pertinent that Chisholm was not only a psychiatrist and first head of the World Health Organization, but also an atheist, a communist, and possibly a Satanist. The intent of removing individualism from the minds of man would speak to replacing it with the mindset of collectivism, aka communism, in which the individual is not important. Remember Karl Marx's list from above. Only what's good for the government is important. The left has used every arrow in its quiver to get there, e.g., declaring a war on pronouns, brainwashing young and impressionable children in our nation's schools, and putting books like Bobby Bunny Has Two Daddies in their libraries at elementary schools, or convincing public libraries, and even military bases to host drag queen story hour for kids, corrupting our language, institutions, and labels in their strategy of cancel culture, and the use of identity politics, which is designed to divide us, demoralize us, and run roughshod over our nation's long-standing cultural status quo under the aegis of political correctness and the concept of moral relativity. Not to be overlooked is a book you can find at Barnes and Noble called Bye Bye Binary. It's a picture book meant for preschoolers in which the leftist author is trying to indoctrinate children to the idea that they can decide their own gender. Again, think of Vladimir Lenin's "Give me the children for 4 years, and the seeds I sow will never be uprooted." This is what's being used against American children and the traditional family, and it's not of God's making. To reach some significance, let's hit the rewind button and go back to Karl Marx for a moment. In the 1840s, European society was organized differently than America is today, or ever was. Their nobility and royalty owned everything, and society was set up on a structure of social classes. Since Marx was not part of the social elite, his delicate sensibilities were apparently offended, and he railed against them. He was like a kid who gets left without a chair when the music stops. He wrote about a utopia wherein society would be classless and nobody would own anything, thus, in his mind, making everybody equal. When socialism was adopted in Venezuela, everybody became equal. When everybody is poor, then everybody is equal, aren't they? Making everybody equal played well among Russians, who many decades later became unhappy with the Tsar and overthrew him to establish a Marxist/communist system. For the next several decades, Russia struggled under socialism only to come to the conclusion that capitalism would provide them with a far better life and higher standard of living. To put a finer point on it, you can change a government, but you can't change human nature. When communists came here in the 1930s, those who had been teaching at the Frankfurt School, which consisted mostly of neo-Marxists, had hoped for a socialist revolution in Germany, but got fascism instead. As mentioned, many of them escaped to America and began teaching at Columbia University in New York City. What Marxists found in America, however, was that our society was not the same as in Marxist Prussia, where there was widespread economic class-oriented oppression. In other words, there was no ready-made proletariat. So they had to create one. That is why the Democrats can't form a complete sentence without using the word racism, more racist, and appoint openly homosexual people to important positions of government, including Sam Brinton, an LGBT activist who served as Biden's Deputy Assistant Secretary of Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition in the Office of Nuclear Energy. Coincidentally, he is a transsexual who stole women's clothing at airport baggage carousels so he could wear their clothing. By persuading women, blacks, Latins, feminists, gays, or whoever they could convince to see themselves as oppressed, they hoped to make them dissatisfied enough to stir up a Marxist-style revolution like 1917 Russia. And now we have trained Marxists operating under the banner of Black Lives Matter, among others, and receiving preferential treatment from Democrats. Speaking of training Marxists, we need a sidebar here on Black Lives Matter for the politics and religion subject matter.